We'll continue with our appreciation and discussion of the Paramitas, and the one today is Sila, or precepts. And Sila means precepts and is sometimes translated as morality, but it's not morality in its usual meaning. Silas are guidelines for living a healthy, conscious life, and when a person receives the 16 Zen Bodhisattva precepts, they vow to use the precepts as guidelines for living in a manner that helps them follow the Buddha path. So of course, when you receive Jukai, you vow to maintain the 16 Bodhisattva precepts, and may not go through them today unless there's one that particularly comes up for you. But what I want to talk about in general, though, is that just mindfully vowing what it means. And when taken on mindfully, vows can be a source of surprising wisdom and powerful energy, enabling you to accomplish things you never dreamed possible. It can have profound effects even beyond the original intention, and it can even live on after you're gone. A vow can be as small as the intention to be kind to annoying people in your life, or it can be as large as a commitment to save all sentient beings. But whatever its inspiration, when it's done with conscious intention, a vow becomes a conduit for energy of your life. And then when a person violates right conduct, it's also expected to make every effort to realign his or her conduct in accord with the precepts and to take the actions necessary to restore the harmony of the Sangha. Such atonement is an integral part of right conduct. The study and practice of these precepts is a lifelong effort and is a responsibility of each person who endeavors to live the Buddha way. These precepts are not intended as a legislation of morality, but to encourage each of us, teachers and students alike, to always examine the basic attitudes that we need to accomplish the way. As human beings struggling to accomplish the refined life of the Buddha, the responsibility always rests with each one of us. All who come to practice have to assume the responsibility for oneself, the welfare of others and the Sangha, and the Buddha Dharma. It is through such efforts that mutual trust and respect and the joy of practice will flourish in our Sangha. So this is the little write-up I sent around. I think if we think about it carefully, almost everything we do in life has its origin in a vow of some sort. Maybe conscious or unconscious. Getting up in the morning, getting out of bed. Here I am again. One more time. About 3 years ago, I think it's been now, I read a couple of books. One of them was written by a successor of Genki Roshi, who was a Native American teacher. And everything in his life was built around vow. Everything they did, asking for guidance from all of the various spirits, and vowing, to fulfill certain aspirations, to live in harmony. And then reading that and reading another book by Chosen Bay's Roshi, a Dharma sister, about a life-centered vow, a life of fueled by vow, I decided that every morning when I put on my mala, I was going to write my own vow, and general vow, and every morning when I put on my mala, I recite it, and I invoke all of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, and I ask them to help me greet this day with an open heart, and to walk on Mother Earth with deep gratitude of all of her gifts. And then I end with the Paramita of wisdom, Mahaprajna Paramita. So, I mean, when I think about it, everything, without exception, comes from Mother Earth. Everything in this room. I mean, we've talked about this before. But you can't look at one thing that does it. This iPhone. Every component in it comes from Mother Earth. And some of you are wearing glasses. Not only the lenses, but the little screws, that hold in the temples, come from Mother Earth. And all the plastic that holds it together. So. Everywhere, we have all these offerings, that are being given to us, And, living out here in the country, we can see some of the other things, that the native people who lived there before us, appreciated. So when we have a vow, and it can take any form, and like I said, it gives us the input, the energy, and we never know where it's going to head. And I've said this many times before too. When I asked Shishin Wick Roshi if anything continues after we die, because in a lot of Buddhist traditions they emphasize reincarnation. And I've asked every Zen master I've studied with about reincarnation. And when I asked Shishin Wick Roshi, he said yes. He says our vows. That's what continues, is our vows. And so what kind of momentum are we putting into our life that continues forward? Now.
Buddha nature.
Hmm?
Buddha nature.
Well, so how we actualize Buddha nature, actually. So, anyway, that's just a question, and I think it's important too, that we all have aspirations, and then if we don't feel like we're fulfilling them, then we get very hard on ourselves. The two killer emotions of guilt and shame kind of descend on us. But I keep remembering something I read of Dogen, I think it was in Shoshogi. He said that the 1,000 failures lead to the one success. So what does it mean to be successful too? Then, we can ask all those questions. What is a one success? Whatever our vows are is to fulfill them. May our vows be completely realized. We chant that sometimes after we, as a dedication. I mentioned a couple of you, I just finished reading a book that was just published. It's called The American Sutra. And it's written by a man named Duncan, who was a Soto Zen priest in America. And what it's about is the internment of the Japanese during World War II. And he spent 18 years researching it, including looking at diaries of people who were in these camps or before the camps. And all of the Japanese considered were unsafe zone along the coast, were relocated into these camps, and they were like concentration camps essentially. They had barbed wire and guards, and the people who were considered the most dangerous were Buddhist priests, because it was a foreign religion, and the teachers and principals of the Japanese language schools, and there was another thing that's escaping one. They went first. They arrested all of them because they felt that their allegiance, was to Japan, and even though many of them were Americans, and then about 90% of them were Buddhists and maybe 10% Christian, and the Christians had a much easier time of it than the Buddhists because they had support outside the community, and people felt a little more comfortable with them. But the book is basically about how they maintained their Buddhist faith, their Buddhist practice, and their vows through all of this. And even those who wanted to join the military and fight for the U.S. had to go through many, many hoops, to test their loyalty. And they didn't trust people who had been back to Japan and then come back to the United States. But then, as it turned out, those were the most valuable people for the intelligence of the military, because they knew the language, they knew the customs, and they helped, tremendously, the United States. But the contention of the author is that it created a new Buddhism, American Buddhism, because they had to adapt to a hostile environment and continue, and due to the internment camps, Buddhism moved further east in the United States. It was pretty much concentrated in Hawaii and the West Coast, where the Japanese were. It moved all the way across the Midwest. There were camps in the Midwest. People settled there, and it spread Buddhism, and it was mostly about how the American Sutra. The sutra means the warp and the weave, like a fabric, like creating a fabric. But I was so impressed, under such oppressive situations, that these people just maintained, their belief and their practice, and there's some really very heart-wrenching stories about what happened to these people. And of course, they lost practically everything. They had to start all over again.
Government took everything from them.
Yeah. Well, also, they put their belongings in storage in some of the temples. When they were taken away, the temples were vandalized, or taken over by other people. Their farms were taken over, and they couldn't get them back. And so they keep starting all over again. Yeah. And anyway, it's a challenge, and I think everybody's life is a challenge to a certain extent. So how do we maintain it? So one of my Zumi Roshi's teachers, Koryo Roshi, had a zendo in Tokyo called the Hanya Dojo, Hanya Wisdom, and they had a motto which was Kai Jo A, Kai Jo A. Kai is the Jukai, is the precepts, okay? Kai. And Jo is samadhi, and A is wisdom. So the next two paramitas are samadhi and wisdom. So we'll be, the next time talk about samadhi, and the next time about wisdom. So he felt that was important. All three of those were like three legs of the practice there. And so we have a koan actually about, it's called the head and the tail. And the head and the tail are wisdom, which is clear seeing, and then the tail is the functioning of wisdom, which is the compassion, how the compassion works. And the koan is, what about somebody who has, so if you have a head of a dragon and a tail of a dragon, you have wisdom and you have the compassion that goes with it. And he said, what about those, who have the head of a dragon and the tail of a snake, and they see clearly, but they don't know what to do, so that's only, a stool with one leg, it's not going to support anything. And he said, what about those who have the head of a snake and the tail of the dragon? And they might be the most dangerous ones because they don't see clearly, but they always want to fix things, always want to do things. They have all this action, but they don't quite see clearly what the impacts, and when I remember preparing talks on this subject, and I remember reading that for example, well, a very good example is, when we had the malaria outbreaks, and they developed DDT, to kill the mosquitoes, then there were effects of the DDT in the whole ecosystem, so that's not seeing clearly, but of course part of it is not knowing what's going to happen. I mean, we have a problem right now with that Boeing Max 8 aircraft, fixing providing a cheap transportation, but then,
It crashes.
it crashes, yeah. And then there's somebody who has the head of the snake and the tail of the snake. What kind of person is that?
Lost.
Not the kind you want to be around.
They don't see anything and they don't do anything. It's kind of meh. I don't worry about them. They're no problem. Yeah. No problem at all.
It seems like we have a lot of those types nowadays, particularly in Congress.
Well,
Sorry.
yeah. Well, they're not motivated.
They are doing something.
So how to balance these out, in a way that's effective in whatever it is that we want to affect in our life, and kind of it's easy for me, I have to admit, because when I became a Dharma heir of Maizumi Roshi, we have an expression that say you put on the iron yoke, and so his vows became my vows. That's part of the transmission. That I carry it forward. So I don't have to think about what the purpose of my life is. It's pretty clear. What I've been doing, and that persistence is really valuable. Really valuable. I think we were talking about effort last week, and we talked about even the Buddha said even a small drop of water against a rock, will wear away a big hole. That's just the persistence, being stiff in what we do. And if we don't know what we should be doing, that's okay too. I mean, sometimes we get desperate, and that's called the dark night of the soul. Sometimes we really have to go through that in order to see. We just totally feel at sea without any bearings, I mean, I've certainly gone through that myself too, so, even after, it was clear, that I should be carrying on Maizumi Roshi's, the vows. When, Eigyoku Roshi gave Inca to Roshi Shinko, she said, one of the things she said is, do not let the Dharma seed die. Do not let the Dharma seed die. Yeah. So, so our mission is pretty clear. We have our orders. Carry on. Right? But it's not a burden. It's not a burden. I mean, there were times, when I would question, am I doing it the right way? Am I doing the right thing? But it was never whether I should continue or not.